Hulu's Castle Rock is another terrifying vision from the mind of Stephen King. I'm Zach Laws of Gold Derby, and with me now is Greg Yaitanes. He directed one of the episodes of Castle Rock. And Greg, tell us a little bit about the episode. It's entitled The Queen. How did you come to direct this episode?
My agent represents Sam and Dusty and had helped put together Castle Rock. And it was on my radar. And I was in the middle of Unabomber at the time and didn't have the bandwidth to engage. But when I got out, I was such a rabid Stephen King fan growing up. His books kept me company on many a mundane kind of day job. And when it lined up, actually, I think I was actually being talked about for an earlier episode. The Queen came up and it all lined up kind of beautifully and perfectly at the right time.
What's interesting about your career, I mean, you're somebody who directs a wide variety of television. You've worked on episodes of Lost, Damages, House, Ray Donovan, Unabomber, like you said, lots of different things. How do you adapt your style each time to, come onto a new show? Tell us a little bit about doing that.
It's a muscle that comes from early episodic directing. The pivot to the needs that are in front of you. You're there to help. So I'm looking at what's my way in? What is the material saying? What are the needs of the production and how can I fit into that? And I have to be incredibly flexible because I'm given a script I didn't know I was getting and a crew I had never met before and have to conjure something and pull it together. So it's actually been sort of the exciting thing is that are the different genres and the different places and the different people, because every experience is different. And I really came to thrive off that change every few weeks.
So then what were some of the requirements of this one?
What was interesting was even though it was late in the season, there still wasn't material yet for me to see. Cuts were all in progress. And I looked at some mood board images and just kind of talked it through with Sam. But what was interesting is that this episode was a standalone and really almost entirely from Ruth's point of view, which really gave me something very visceral to grab onto. And I was able to, with Sam, really map out, and we established together the language of kind of the seamless transitions in time. We made the decision to have Sissy play herself at all ages. And it was really a kind of a deep dive collaboration with Sam.
So I want to go a little deeper in some of those things you said, but first, can you just give us a little bit of a recap for people who haven't seen the episode, just what it was about and why it was a standalone one?
There's all the moving parts of the ensemble of the season, and then we end up coming into Ruth's point of view. Ruth is one of she's the adopted mother of Henry. We've seen her in passing. We know she's suffering from Alzheimer's, but this journey was designed to connect the dots of these mini scenes you've seen and then understand Alzheimer's from a point of view that never has been represented this way in television.
I thought it was interesting. I mean, you said, how you had Sissy Spacek, who's at the center of this episode. She's playing herself in all the flashbacks, and you're using younger actors to play her counterparts. What led to that decision?
Quantum Leap is probably my favorite show. So, and it was I even do a nod to it where we see the reflection and we kind of come off the reflection. We did that actually practically with a cowboy switch. Skylar Fisk, who's Sissy's daughter, plays her younger self a couple of times, just so that people knew that those characters were actually seeing the younger self, and we, for benefit of ourselves, are seeing Sissy play all the performance. I mean, we thought that was critical to have, but it was just something that I kind of loved, that you always saw Scott Bakula in because that's who you were emotionally connected to, and having to invest in a younger version of Sissy was going to be a lot harder work than kind of celebrating that. And it really was her journey. And I imagine that when you dream and you don't see yourself in the dream, that there's a sense of your present self and everything now has gone with you to those flashbacks.
And there's something about Sissy Spacek also. I mean, she's number one, she's such a familiar face. We've we've been seeing her for over 40 years now in
50.
movies and on television. Yeah,
Yeah.
50. And there's something familiar about it and also very empathetic about it as well. Can you talk a bit about working with Sissy Spacek and what that was like?
Oh my God, it was funny because some of the younger, or not younger, but newer actors, were quizzing me to ask questions. I've been fortunate to work with, these legends. I worked with Diane Keaton, I worked with Susan Sarandon, all of which gave me the tools to work with Sissy, and to really protect her process. And you can't. One thing I learned, working with real vets is, and you don't want to do this with any actor, but especially you have to engage them as a collaborator, and you can't just show up and try to expect to push Sissy Spacek around like she's a piece of furniture. And you really, like we brought her into the process like from the beginning about conceptually how this was going to go, technically what would be needed, and then how we would protect the performance and the work within that structure. So, I worked with her on the schedule, like how she likes to work, what's the day, what's the best structure of the day for her, down to, engaging those choices, giving room in my work to make sure that she had time to reset. So that was kind of the collaboration we had. Now, working with her, when you've created that trust and laid that foundation, was I I I I mean it when I say the ground moved around her when she worked. Like when she is summoning the character, because she doesn't carry the character with her, she brings it to the moment. So you feel this swell of energy just being like grabbed in and then just bursting out. And it's a really incredible thing. I've seen her do it, time after time in that episode. And then you want to like take that out for a drive and see what's possible and bring things. And when she's got 50 years of experience, other actor friends of mine would ask me to ask her how she's had that longevity. And it's, she's so there and so hard scrabble and kind of the earth, that it's kind of a sumptuous thing to dig into in terms of her creative process.
Absolutely. You mentioned wanting to represent Alzheimer's in a unique and different way. Can you just talk a bit about how you did that visually and editorially?
Well, Sam, this really generated from Sam. I think Sam lost his mother to Alzheimer's. And, when he wrote this kind of as a Valentine to that process, instead of showing it as this debilitating, awful, sad experience, he instead looked for the beauty within it and imagined. And really, you've seen the people that are missing time. They don't know where they are. They're having conversations. They mistake people for other people. You've seen those kind of representations. So Sam's interpretation of that, of what could be possible, was that this person was obviously living out another constructed story. And what if those stories were kind of interconnected, moving through time, showing that when somebody's mistakes you for a younger person or a younger version of yourself, that they're actually inhabiting a narrative. And then what does that narrative look like to go with the Alzheimer's patient into that space, which you've never really seen? You've always seen it from, the kind of very devastated family member or husband that doesn't know what to do. Um, and it's, those are also beautifully told. And this was a very unique way to go about it, because there was a real heartbreaking beauty to the way Sam portrayed it in the script.
What attracts you to the different stories you tell? I mean, we routed off a list of shows you've worked on before, and that was only scratching the surface. So, I mean, what do you look for in a television series that you want to work on?
Um, as I'm 25 years in on my TV career, and so I look for working with grown-ups. I want to come to the table with people that want to get in the mud and collaborate, um, and have a kindness in doing that. That's important to me, is like collaborating with people either I care about. So I want to go back to repeat collaborations. So just on a base level of like knowing that, then the next kind of layer is what's the story and can I find myself in it? I've had opportunities that are great that I just couldn't sort of find my way into initially, or I wasn't in the right headspace or kind of in the right creative space to approach them. But for something like Quarry, for example, that had all the interpersonal relationships housed in a hitman drama is what attracted me. It's like, here's genre with deep, rich character. And I could find my parents and my grandparents and me here and me there in terms of those relationships. So like that, for example, was a way in. Castle Rock was the world. I come from Massachusetts. So it's shot in Massachusetts. I know Maine, where it's set. So the idea of like telling a story that was from New England, shooting where I grew up, where I've never been to work since I left at 18, really like was meaningful. And because I knew those people and I knew that story and I wanted to tell it. And that was my way into the Queen.
I wanted to ask you briefly about something else that you worked on this year. You directed an episode of The Twilight Zone, the
Yeah.
episode Nightmare at 30,000 Feet, which
Yeah.
is probably the most iconic episode of The Twilight Zone ever done. So what
Richard
was that like?
Donner is actually one of my DGA sponsors.
Wow, really? No
Like,
kidding.
so like to go and then like reboot, a Richard Donner, Richard Donner's episode was pretty big shoes.
Well, how did you find your way into that? I mean, how did you reinvent it?
It was all being driven by Monkey Paw and Simon Kinberg's company. I really had an affinity for the material, and when I heard they were doing it, I pursued it as a way to kind of come in as a companion collaborator in it. I wasn't generating it, and I had earmarked that episode to do the idea. Like, I am deeply attracted to self-contained episodes. The Queen really almost entirely takes place at the Deaver house. Nightmare takes place really almost entirely inside the plane. My favorite house episodes all took place sometimes in a single room or location. I love my favorite episode of Homicide was all in the box. I really am drawn to single space stories, and that particular one was important to try to bring a new twist on. So I tried to bring a kind of what a Robert Zemeckis approach to a Richard Donner reboot through Jordan Peele's eyes might be. So that's what I came up with.
Speaking of House, you're an Emmy winner for your work on that for the episode House's Head. Can you talk a bit about what that recognition meant for you?
That was, at that point I'd been directing television for nearly 20 years, and so, you know, I was a big underdog in that. I was up against the Mad Men Damages and Breaking Bad pilots, and so I was literally just thrilled to be there in that process. So I I did not expect that to happen. So there was just a sense of surprise and kind of dreaminess to it, as well as, I'd worked with so many people in that room, and it had come just after the writer's strike, which was something that, as someone who loves his craft, and you mourn when the business goes through difficult times, because it's like a marriage. It's like a downturn in a marriage, and you're trying to kind of weather that and get through to back to the good times. And that was really a great celebration in a lot of ways for me at that particular time in my life.
And what are you working on right now? Is there anything you can tell us about?
I'm actually I'm doing the new season of Castle Rock, so which is a whole new story and all new characters. So I'm doing the first episode of that to kind of get off the ground. I'm actually outside Bad Robot doing this stream with you here. So it's coming together beautifully. I'm coming back later in the season to do episode 9 and helping them out along the way. So it's great to kind of be back at it. I mean, I'm collaborating with Dusty more this year. I was kind of exclusively with Sam. I'm exclusively with Dusty this year, and it's kind of great because they were a great partnership, and their collaboration is really beautiful, and I see why they worked so well together.
Well, Greg, thanks so much for your time, and
That was my pleasure.
congratulations on your work.
This was
Thank you.
great. So thanks for having me. I agree. Take care. Bye.
You too. Thank you. And thanks to all of you at home for watching. Make sure you click the like and subscribe button below, and make sure you visit us at goldderby.com for all the latest Emmy news and to make your predictions.